Welcome to this brief overview of INWAC's volunteer policy and procedures. What exactly is a college volunteer? A college volunteer is defined as any uncompensated individual over the age of 18 who voluntarily offers services to support specific programs of the college which may benefit from the individual's knowledge, training, and expertise. Keep in mind, college volunteers may not be used to replace employee positions. What about INWAC employees? Can they also be volunteers at INWAC? While they are allowed to volunteer, keep in mind a current college employee may not serve as a college volunteer in any capacity in which they are employed at the college, or which is similar or related to the employee's regular work responsibilities. Current employees may volunteer for special events, programs, or in any capacity that differs from their regular employment. However, the employee shall not receive any extra compensation or benefit for such volunteer service. Exempt employees can volunteer for INWAC events without restriction. For non-exempt employees, supervisors should consult with Human Resources before allowing non-exempt employees to volunteer for INWAC events that occur during non-working hours. Now that we know who can volunteer, what are the steps to have a volunteer? The first step is to submit a volunteer request form to your supervisor for approval. After that is approved, the person volunteering must complete and return the volunteer agreement form. All forms are attached to 9018 INWAC Volunteer Policy in Policy Stat, linked at the end of this training. Both completed forms are required to be emailed to prc@nwacc.edu. It is up to the supervisor of the volunteer to ensure the volunteer is familiar with college procedures and they are trained to complete the task for which they are volunteering. In some cases, a volunteer may be required to complete a comprehensive background check. The college recognizes there will be large-scale internal and external events that may involve minors, and these events will require volunteers to help with setup, check-in, guest speakers, etc. Background checks will not be required for those volunteers. If a volunteer is assigned to work exclusively with youth and minor programs, overseeing a student or group of students in an isolated setting where they bear sole responsibility for the students, they must submit to a comprehensive background and registered sex offender check, and are required to take mandated reporter training under Arkansas state law. If a background check is needed, Human Resources must conduct criminal background and registered sex offender checks and receive acceptable results before the volunteer can engage in any activities or services to the college. After the background check has cleared, the volunteer supervisor must contact the INWAC Compliance Office for mandatory reporter training for the volunteer. Now let's look at some different types of volunteer services that may be needed at INWAC. The following are examples of services requiring volunteer agreement and background checks. This list includes, but is not limited to, activities with minors such as specialty camps, long-term or ongoing volunteer services such as mentoring, recreational and competitive sports, services requiring access to confidential information, volunteer host families for international student athletes and international students, and traveling with student groups. The following are examples of services that do not require a volunteer agreement or background check. This list includes, but is not limited to, commencement volunteer, fundraising event volunteer, public speakers, ushering campus events, and participation in all volunteer committees. Keep in mind, there are some prohibited activities. These activities include, but are not limited to, operating heavy equipment, working with infectious or potentially infectious agents or hazardous materials, or in environments that may place the volunteer at risk for physical harm, entering into any contract or agreement on behalf of the college, any activity considered inappropriate for a college employee, and driving a college-owned vehicle or a vehicle rented by the college. Each area is responsible for keeping track of their volunteers. A college volunteer may serve no longer than 1 year without renewal. All forms and processes above must be renewed annually for current volunteers who will serve in the same capacity on a long-term basis. It is the responsibility of the department to set reminders for volunteer renewals. Volunteers should be aware they may be terminated without prior notice. Likewise, a volunteer may terminate their services without prior notice. Volunteers who fail to comply with volunteer regulations may be terminated. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the INWAC volunteer policy. You may find the full policy and procedures at the link on this slide. For questions, please contact the INWAC Office of Policy and Compliance at compliance@nwacc.edu.